expect your bass amp to have a specific color or to be transparent? In other words, do you expect your bass to sound like your amp or your amp to sound like your bass? Welcome back to the Wetter Bass. In the last video I said we would talk about this pedal, the Super Fuzz V2 from Anonymous Head Effects. But we will have to postpone this video to next week because I had the opportunity to test 4 basses through my amp. And I thought you would find this interesting. Furthermore, you get to discover the new ROD500 Head from a brand called Stopko and the Double Six bass cab from a French builder called GSS, which stands for Guitar Sound Systems. So let's start comparing basses. The obvious first observation is how different these bass guitars sound. To record, we used a Sennheiser E602 that adds warmth and fatness, and a Lewitt LCT 440 Pure that really catches the acoustic details of the Double Six. I did have to lower the volume by 8 decibels of the Sennheiser for this video because it added way too much lows, so that you can listen to a more accurate acoustic sound of the amp. The basses used are my US 91 22 frets jazz bass, a US 79 precision bass, a short-scale Hofner violin bass, both from clients by the way, and the mid-scale 5-string precision bass inspired prototype I made and play in most of my videos. A bit about the ROD500. This head is designed to amplify the bass signal without coloring it. There's a clarity and openness to the sound that is hard to find in Class D amps. It reminds me of the Glockenklang Soul head I had some years ago, a brand known for its transparent, responsive and high fidelity sound. But that head weighs more than 11 kilos, which is the weight of the cab by the way, while the Stopko less than 3 kilos. I always regretted selling the Soul head until now. Stopko is making an incredible entrance in the bass amp world, with an elegant yet gamer type of aesthetics, with its transparent top, black housing and touches of green here and there, from the discrete green metal screws to the bright green LED logo on top. It also feels super solid, and the fact that you can see the inner guts of the head is proof that Stopko has nothing to hide and instead wants you to look what's inside. Surely a sign of self-confidence. Once I receive the 12-inch cab from Stopko, I will do a complete review of this amp. But for the moment, let me tell you that I always thought a Class D amp would never have the dynamics of a more traditional power amp. And this one proved me wrong. Oh, and a small but important detail, especially in studio, it's dead quiet. So unless you really push the head to its limits, the fan will not turn on because it doesn't have to. So to summarize, dynamics and clarity. However, there is a downside to these attributes. More on that later. And now a little bit about the GSS Double Six. This cab uses two 6.5-inch studio monitoring PHL audio loudspeakers designed and manufactured in France. And according to GSS, they offer a very flat response over a wide frequency range. The cabinet is made of poplar wood sourced exclusively from sustainable forests, which is a nice touch, and even has recycled cotton wool as an internal damping material. Furthermore, the Double Six is entirely hand-assembled in France. This cab is one of the clearest and most responsive I ever heard or used. No need for a horn or a tweeter to discern the highs. And okay, it obviously doesn't have the lows of a bigger cab, but it has an uncolored articulation that certainly has to do with the studio monitoring origin of its loudspeakers. Whatever you plug into it, you'll hear it as it is. So it's the ideal cab for studio, for example, or to test heads or basses. As I mentioned earlier in the video, when pairing the Double Six with the ROD500 and its EQ set to noon, I did come across a problem. Because of its wide frequency response, dynamics and clarity, the ROD500 pumps out some serious subs that at a certain volume the GSS cab cannot handle, especially with a 5-string bass. So as long as the volume is kept at a decent level, all's good. There are two solutions if more volume is needed. One is to lower the bass on the ROD500 and raise slightly the low mids to fatten up the sound. And the other is to insert a compressor in the loop of the head. I also tested this cab with a Taurus Vandal 500 Bass Head. The response was completely different as the sound seemed to be more compressed while the frequency range slightly less wide. This means it sounded louder and more compact, but not nearly as open and transparent as the ROD500. And yeah, the fan on the Taurus is not very discreet. It's easy to add stain to a white paint, but almost impossible to a dark one. Trying to hear a particular nuance with a clear amp is a lot easier than with a grainier one. Now don't get me wrong, I like both types of amps. The proof is my son started playing bass about a year ago. Poor boy. I told him, don't do bass. Your mother's a bass player, your father's a bass player, just don't do bass. And we got him an Ampeg Rocket Bass Combo, the 12-inch 100-watt version. It's super light. It looks fantastic. It sounds great, especially that onboard overdrive. That sounds so warm and fat and juicy and I like it. But that combo doesn't really care about what kind of bass signal you feed it with because it just sounds like an Ampeg. So in the end, I prefer the cleanest amp possible because I can keep it that way or color the hell out of it, and I got plenty of pedals to do so. But for my son who's starting and is into classic rock, it just had to be Ampeg. Right, next week the Superfuzz V2. Please like and subscribe. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.